thinking about your own journey. They say you can never go home. The question I'd like to have you think about is, in what ways have you never left home?
That's like I say, it's a four-dimensional thing. So the time element and the place where you live, that's unique to you. To me, it is. I mean, when I think of Castle Rock, the visualization doesn't pop into what it is today. I just think back of what it was like as a small town. I'm a fifth-generation Douglas County person on both my mother and my father's side. So my mother, her maiden name was Bean, and on her father's side, we go back to a guy that came from Scotland in 1652, but he was an indentured servant. He was captured by the English in a battle and sent over here, and that was, if you read much about that, it was before the years of black slavery in the colonies, so they would take convicts, orphans, anybody, just to provide labor. You could buy your way out. Otherwise, you had indentured servitude for between 5 and 7 years, something like that.
So are you standing up there on a stage or something?
Well,
auctioned off?
I could only visualize it, but they would bring on one at a time, and people would actually bid on them, and then you would have to pay off that bid through your labor. And that was in Boston where he landed. Unfortunately, because a lot of those indentured servants went to southern plantations. I've read where, I think well over half of them died before their time was up. But he was shrewd. This guy that bought him was from New Hampshire, and he ended up marrying the boss's daughter. So he only spent like
starting way back then.
Yeah, we looked dumb, but we're not bad. So after a few generations, my side of the family moved to Maine, and then I had a great uncle, Ronaldo Bean, and he was in the Civil War in 2 different regiments. So the second one is with General Sherman marching through Georgia. But anyway, sometime after World War, he decided to come to Denver. So he brought a brother, one brother named Llewellyn, which I find an odd name for a man. So the 2 of them came to Denver. They supposedly were on the first passengers train that stopped in Denver. That was 1870.
Start down memory lane. Ed, where did you live growing up?
Well, from age 1 through the time I went to college, I lived right next door where you live now.
Oh, here?
Yeah, right over here.
Where did you go to school?
I went across the street to Cantrell Elementary.
Over there. Where did you go to church?
Well, I really got an interest and came right here.
So live, school,
yes.
church, small world.
Oh, well, it's, not only that, at the time, my great-grandmother and my grandmother lived across the street in the stone house where Kathy lives. So I had, and then later in life, or later in years, I should say, my mother's mother, my grandma Bean, lived in a little cottage next to you. So at one point I had parents, grandmother, great-grandmother, grandmother, school, church right here. So.
Amazing.
So I thought that was totally normal until I got and learned other people didn't have that. So.
Yeah, take us back. Yeah. What was it like living in Castle Rock then?
Castle Rock was, I was born in 1946, and I would imagine Castle Rock was a population of 1,100 people, maybe 1,200, something like that. So it was almost like Mayberry. It was a great town. It was between Denver and Colorado Springs, so it was close to go anywhere if you really wanted to. There were stores and movie theaters, etc. But here in town, it was pretty basic. We had a couple little grocery stores, I remember. And
where were they?
They were, if you go, do you know where Angie's restaurant is?
Yes. Yeah.
And you know, Castle Cafe? Right in between there was a store, or a food store. It was Ross King's food store. And then over on the other side of Wilcox, kind of would be up to the south of the VMD, there was Jake Kroll had a food store there. So, and my dad, when I was growing up, had the feed store and grain elevator. So the feed store was actually where Angie's restaurant is, right in that corner. And then the grain elevators down here, which you still see today. So.
And not only was it a small town, but it was higher everywhere.
Oh, it was. And Curtis's. And I can explain later, but we're all related to the Hiers and the Curtis's. So, matter of fact, my cousin Bill Hier used to like to say that one year we got so thick that the county had to spray for us.
There was higher drilling, higher real estate.
Yeah.
And your mom and dad, Carol and Flo, I've heard wonderful stories. I knew Carol.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's getting worse, isn't it?
But I've heard wonderful stories. They were like Mr. and Mrs. Castlerock.
Well, they were. My father, well, he was born in 1911 and lived mostly over around Sedalia, that area. But as a young man, he did odd jobs. I remember he was an iceman for a while. Before the days of refrigeration, he used to pack blocks of ice into houses for what we call ice boxes. I mean, the people chill their food that way.
Before the day of what?
Refrigeration.
Iceman coming.
Yeah. And I remember he only weighed like 135 pounds as a young man, and these blocks of ice were a good 100 pounds, so he'd pack those in all the time. But anyway, later he ran for county assessor when he was in the late 20s and won. And he was an assessor for, I think, 2 or 3 terms. And then he was able to buy the feed store at that point in the grain elevator. So he did that for many years. And then after he retired from that, or he sold that store, and then we raised turkeys, raised poultry for a number of years. So when I was growing up from about age of 12 to 18, he was in the poultry business. We'd have about 20 to 30,000 turkeys a year.
Wow.
We had a little place over on Prairie Park Road where we had that mostly. And then later he ran for county clerk and recorder, and he did that for about 12 years.
See what I mean, Mr. Castlerock?
And along the way, he was mayor of Castle Rock for a number of years, and he was on the school board, and I got town council a few times too. So it was really neat. I don't know if you know Jamie LaRue, the librarian. He did a real nice thing for my father about 3 years before he died. He got with the county commissioners, and they created what they called a Carol Hier Day. And the commissioners presented a plaque, and the school board did in the town in appreciation for all those years. So it was kind of neat to do.
It will have been 65 years since you were baptized in the chapel.
That's right.
Is that right?
Next month, 65 years.
Yes, 65 years.
So it's just that little square building. Actually, there weren't even any restrooms in it, so pretty fast sermons. Out of order. And I don't remember his face, but it was Reverend Russell that was the minister that came out. And we didn't have a resident priest at that time. And the first priest I remember was Father Thayer, who became bishop. When he came, he had a young priest with him named Father Pipkin. So as the church grew over the years, we were able to afford a full-time priest, and that became Father Pipkin. And he was pretty young at the time. I'm not sure how old, but I was with him all through like confirmation class and acolyte. And he was here till, I guess I went to college, so after about age 18. And then he left, and Father White came. And Father White I didn't know very well. I was going to college, and I have to admit, several years after college, I wasn't really very regular here. I would come to holidays and a few times, but not very regular. So I never got to know him all that well. And then Father Rufy came after that, who I really thought a lot of. He was a great person. And he actually married Sue and I.
Oh, really? You
Yeah.
got married here too?
Yes. Actually, speaking of that, my grandparents were the first couple to get married in the church. That was about 1908. And then my parents got married here, and then I was married here, and then my nephew was married here. So you have 4 generations now. So anyway, Father Rufy, of course, was a great guy, and he was here kind of the twilight of my mother's life, so he helped her an awful lot. He was very close. And of course, Father Rick came next, and they happened to be in my father's twilight of life, and he became just a little story that my dad had a very deep voice. I don't know if any of you remember him, but more than once he said, I really like Rick because he can talk about stuff besides religion. So that they would talk about ranching and cattle and horses and stuff. So they were here. This was actually a vacant lot when I was growing up. My dad happened to own this lot. So
Surprise!
we had like 3 apple trees here, and I remember a simple basketball court. So I played a lot right here where we're sitting today. The Little Bears school started. You all know Mildred Stewart probably, and her daughter Natalie Young. So Mildred is my first cousin. Her mother.
I've been told so many times you have to be really careful in this county.
Oh,
Because everybody's related to everybody.
it's I try to explain it to my wife. My great grandmother that helped found this church was in Curtis. She came here from Wales when she was like 9 years old. And on Prairie Park Road, there's a Curtis Ranch that's still in the family. That's where she lived as a child. And she, of course, grew up and left the ranch and married my great-grandfather. But one of her brothers, Charles, kept the ranch. And he had 13 children. There's 13 Curtis kids.
No wonder.
Well, what makes it complicated, when my grandfather Hier came here, he came after his brother Charlie Hier came in about 1900. The Curtises came in 1871, so they were kind of homesteading families. So when my great uncle came, there was these 13 Curtis children, so my great uncle Charlie married one of the daughters. And then my grandfather Hier came and married one of their cousins, my grandma Hier. So that wouldn't be all that unusual, but then later, my mom's 2 sisters married 2 of the other Curtis brothers. And 2 of her first cousins married 2 of them. And then late in life, my mom had an aunt that had been widowed, I think, and she had gone through 3 husbands. So she had a 4th husband and married one of the other brothers. So that one Curtis family, it makes your head spin a little bit.
Ed is from, I wrote this down because of last week, I thought it was so clever of you. A gate where hay bales fly.
Yeah.
In other words, Agate, Colorado. So well, believe it or not, Ed finally did move away from Castle Rock. So when did that happen and why?
Well, living here was great. I mean, I was a civil engineer by trade, so I was able to work in Denver and Colorado Springs and elsewhere. So it worked great for working, but as you know, when you talk about a place, it's more than 3-dimensional. There's a time with it. So the Castle Rock place I was familiar with changed. I mean, it grew, and it's fine. I don't want to say anything bad about the new people. I'm sure they enjoy living here, and it's a great community. But it kind of changed for me. It was just not the same place. We talked last week about following your dreams a little bit. I always wanted to own more land. So the price of land here, that was impossible. So we were able, as I retired, didn't have to commute anymore. It made it possible to move further out. So we had 50 acres here, so we essentially traded that for 640 acres out where I live now. So, and it's just a chance to try that lifestyle. It's very rural. Our nearest neighbor is about 2 miles, I think. There's one proverb that you only live as long as you're remembered, and I kind of think that's somewhat true. So I was happy to be able to put that all together.